Hello everyone, this is your friend Shinobi Nexus 2.0 and we are back in new fanfic. What if Naruto's secret hobby got exposed in class? Part 2. The legend of instructor Hatake Kakashi began when he was only a small child. When he was only 6 years old he graduated from the academy, an unprecedented event that was still the point of controversy in some corners of the village, and quickly earned the rank of Chunin. From there, he secured the rank of Junin at the age of 11, and became a member of Konoha's elite, Black Ops Division, Anbu, when he was only 14. Only a select few what missions he performed while wearing the mask of Konoha's Special Force Unit, but the result of his career as an Anbu assassin earned him international prestige as a dangerous opponent. From the smallest obscure ninja clan to the most prestigious village, everyone in the ninja world knew his face. Seldom few actually knew the exact reason why they feared him, but the air of mystery surrounding the man only served to enhance his legacy. What happened next, people could only explain as a drastic decline in his career. Abruptly, 12 years after he first put on the animal mask of Konoha's Black Ops unit, Kakashi resigned from the ranks of Anbu, and despite pleading from his superior officers to reconsider, decided to resume his regular work as a Junin. However, Tsunade would not hear of letting his exemplary talents go to waste running missions for rich merchants, and had reassigned him to educating the next generation of ninja. Much to everyone's surprise, Kakashi took the post teaching of advanced chakra control without complaint, and for the last 4 years had been living the quiet life of an instructor. While he was no longer Anbu, the same enigmatic aura swirled around the Junin like an effervescent cloud. Even though the tall, white-haired ninja had known many of the academy students for his 4 years as an instructor, he was still a mystery to them. For instance, none of them knew why he wore an abnormally large forehead protector across his head so that it concealed his right eye, nor could they explain that face mask of his. An extension of the navy blue jumpsuit Konoha ninjas wore, the mask covered everything below Kakashi's eyes, and as far as anyone knew, no one had ever seen beneath it. Rumors concerning it were rampant. Some claimed it hid the key to an amazing technique, while others hypothesized it was just because their instructor wore it to conceal buck teeth or various other abnormalities. But the speculation was just that, speculation. There had been several attempts, most made by Naruto and his cohort of eager companions, to find out what lay beneath Kakashi's mask, but all of their efforts failed miserably. He slept, bathed, and even ate somehow without lowering the navy blue covering. Even on the rare occasions that their instructor was seen out of uniform, he still had some means of covering the lower regions of his face. It was a mystery. And that was exactly the way Kakashi liked it. Kakashi was a rare breed of instructor at the academy. There were some who loved their job instructing youngsters like the rookie instructor, Yuhi Kurenai, and there were the type who resented their job like the chain-smoking, Sarutobi Asuma. And then here was Hatake Kakashi, who stood on his own little island in the vast sea of stereotypes and generalizations. He never displayed a liking or a disliking for his job, only a stoic sort of indifference that relayed very little about what he was thinking. In fact, no one really knew what was going through the quiet ninja's head half the time, and seldom few ever summoned the courage to inquire. Kakashi might be an instructor at the academy now, but once upon a time ago he was the most feared agent in Anbu, and apparently his reputation still preceded him. He strolled into the courtyard exactly a half-hour late for class, his nose buried in a small pink novella he always carried around. As expected, the moment he came within sight, his students began bombarding him with a hailstorm of rebukes and interrogating questions concerning his whereabouts. Not surprisingly, Naruto was one of the more vocal. Kakashi's perfect hearing easily identified the noisy ninja amidst the dissenting cries of the cacophonic rabble. Closing his book loudly, Kakashi stowed it away in one of his vest pockets. Immediately the class that was so close to rioting a second ago fell silent. They could be as noisy as they pleased while Kakashi made his habitual tardy entrance into his lesson, but once he was ready to go, the students knew better than to continue. They had heard the rumors about their white-haired instructor after all. Everyone had. Sorry, I'm late class, he apologized with a smile. It was said about Kakashi that because no one ever saw his face, people had naturally learned to discern the Junin's emotions through his only visible eye. Right now, for example, the senior year knew that their teacher was clearly smiling. I ran into traffic on the way here. A chorus of groans was the response to Kakashi's apparently unsatisfactory answer. He was always late for his own classes, and his supply of excuses had grown steadily worse over the years as he was forced to create new ones. You don't drive, teacher? One of the girls said. No one in the village does, added one of the boys. Ah, but if I did drive I would be stuck in traffic, Kakashi explained. Before the complete senselessness of his reply sank in with his students, the white-haired Junin hastily moved on with his lesson. As you know, for the end of the semester final, I will be requiring you to display a high-class technique for me that you've been practicing for the last 2 months. He raised his right, glove-covered hand and held it up for the class to see. Suddenly, it exploded in a pyre of blazing blue flames, drawing a few shocked gasps from his audience. The inferno sparkled and hissed, flickering viciously in the air, but despite its deadly appearance, the hand holding the flames appeared completely unharmed. Kakashi clenched his hand into a fist, extinguishing the fire in a wisp of curling smoke. Do not disappoint me, he said seriously, his single eye narrowing gravely. Then, as if nothing had happened, he continued to give instructions pleasantly. Now if you will, please begin practicing. I'll walk around observing if you need any suggestions or help. It was only a half class today, only 18 out of the normal 36, so each student had more individual space to train in the open field designated for such purposes. They spread out, each taking a space near a series of wooden posts that Kakashi had erected for target practice. Quietly, the masked Junin began his rounds. As he watched his students begin practicing their technique, Kakashi could not help but be impressed by the caliber of students this year held. There was exceptional talent in many of them, a fact that a cursory glance of their training quickly proved. Downfield, Shikamaru used his family's shadow bind technique to wrap shadows around the wooden masts and then break them brutally in half. Beside him, his friend, Choji, ballooned into a gigantic ball several times larger than his normal size and completely flattened the post in an admirable showmanship of his clan's meat tank technique. And then there were the girls. Not the outdone by the boys' performance, Kakashi spotted Sakura channeling chakra into her fists so she could tear through the posts like paper. It reminded him of the briefing Tsunade gave him about Naruto's injury the other day, and he unconsciously flinched as another post disintegrated into a shower of splinters. Being on the receiving end of one of Sakura's devastating punches must have really sucked. He continued his walk. Hinata of the Hyuga clan was also busy attacking the posts with her fist, but unlike Sakura, Kakashi noticed her fists never touched the wooden masts. Instead, her opened palm strike would stop a foot away from the pole, delivering a surgical strike of her chakra into it and effectively destroying it. Next to Hinata was a girl with long, red hair that flowed down her back like a mane. In one hand was a compound bow, and in the other were a handful of arrows. Her name was Mayumi Asuka, another excellent markswoman like Tenten, though she preferred only a bow and arrow over the vast array of weapons that her classmate preferred. Kakashi observed interestedly as Asuka strung 4 arrows into her bow, and then fired them off simultaneously. They sped through the air, but before hitting the post, they split off in different directions. Each arrow rocketed up into the sky, spiraling and twisting in a marvelous show of aerial acrobatics, and then came back to the ground to plunge into the wooden pole. A class with such talent would have all made Junin by the age of 17 back in Kakashi's day. It had been a time of war when every ninja counted, and the luxury of spending 17 years in training a ninja was unheard of. But then again, maybe some of these kids would grow up to be normal in a world devoid of war. They might actually retire from being a ninja unscarred, both physically and emotionally. The white-haired instructor sighed. He wondered what that would be like. It was a shame he would never know. Instructor, Sasuke called from his post a few meters away. Kakashi walked over. The young Uchiha looked excited, no, positively ecstatic about something, smiling broadly as he motioned for Kakashi to come closer. I think I finally got it. Kakashi's eyebrow tweaked upwards. It was unusual for something to surprise Kakashi. As Anbu, he learned that the unexpected was usually what ended up getting people killed, and as a result, he made it a point to be prepared for anything. Even still, the legendary Junin could not deny being a little shocked. I've only been teaching you the technique for a month, Sasuke. Are you sure? He asked seriously. Sasuke nodded eagerly. Positive. Want me to show you? Kakashi thought on it for a moment, but then shook his head. No. Surprise me. The young Uchiha looked disappointed, but it faded quickly. Without another word to his instructor, he silently returned to his training. There were those who said Kakashi was showing preferential treatment by giving private lessons to Uchiha Sasuke, and in a sense, the Junin's detractors were partially right. Kakashi identified himself in the boy, seeing many of the traits in Sasuke that he once possessed as a youth, but that alone would not have earned a private lesson from Kakashi. Sasuke had not been the first to seek tutelage from him. There had been a steady parade before him, each asking to be taught a secret technique, but all had been refused. They were simply not skilled enough, and to attempt training prematurely under Kakashi's grueling regime was the equivalent of a long, painful death sentence. Of all of his prospective apprentices, only Sasuke had barely met Kakashi's standards. But to master that technique in a month, Kakashi already believed Sasuke was a genius, but had he been underestimating the Uchiha even then? Kakashi had almost finished his rounds when he saw Naruto. He was standing in front of his pole and his hands were swirling about each other. But other than that, Kakashi had no idea what the young ninja was doing. With a nimble leap, Kakashi landed atop the pole Naruto was training in front of. What are you doing, Naruto? He asked. Naruto's eyes were screwed tight in concentration, but they opened when he heard his instructor's voice. Oh, hi, Instructor Kakashi, he greeted. The boy was sweating heavily. I've just about got it mastered. Kakashi blinked. What do you have mastered? This, Naruto said, grinning. Closing his eyes, Naruto held one palm open and began circling the other around it. He did this faster and faster, as if he was sculpting an invisible, clay jar, but the space in between his hands remained bare. Naruto seemed to realize this, because a cry of frustration escaped his lips, and his hands began moving even swifter than before. Suddenly, a loud whooshing sound could be heard, like wind being sucked into a vacuum, and Kakashi's eye widened in complete and utter surprise. A small blue ball of swirling energy had formed in Naruto's hand, but the sphere obviously unstable. It glowed inconsistently, and despite Naruto's best efforts, was gradually dwindling. A few seconds later it had completely disappeared from sight, leaving Naruto's palm empty once again. Naruto, that's, Kakashi whispered, still paralyzed from the sight of Naruto's technique. If he had been surprised by Sasuke's progress, there were no words to describe the shock he felt after seeing that blue ball of light. Where did you learn that technique? In some scrolls in the library, Naruto began, but he quickly stopped in mid-sentence. Few times had he seen such a severe look from instructor, and never until now had it been focused at him. Gulping, he muttered, I snuck into the archives and found it. You broke into the archives? Kakashi demanded. The archives was a building where Konoha stored all of its most important documents and records, including several scrolls containing powerful, and often forbidden, techniques that the elders had deemed too dangerous to remain in the hands of the public. Whether Naruto knew it or not, breaking into the archives was a trespass worthy of immediate expulsion from the village because of the sensitive information it contained. I could expel you, Naruto. Why in the world did you do that? Naruto looked fearful for a moment in the face of Kakashi's anger, but his stubborn nature bolstered his resolve. Because everyone knows you've been teaching Sasuke some secret, powerful, technique, Instructor Kakashi. What I teach Sasuke is none of your business, Naruto, and it doesn't answer my question. Well, for once I wanted to do something better than him, Naruto muttered darkly. I wanted to find a technique more powerful and special than whatever you're teaching him, and so, his voice trailed off as he began to realize how childish he was sounding. Flushing red with embarrassment, he looked away from his teacher. So you decided the archives were the only place that housed such a technique? Kakashi logically concluded. Are you going to expel me? Asked Naruto. Kakashi was forced to think quickly. There was so much to consider, it seemed unfair to make such a flippant decision. On one hand, it was entirely in Kakashi's right to discipline Naruto severely for such a breach in security. But on the other hand, breaking into the archives showed a level of resolve that few ninjas ever demonstrated. It would have been no easy feat, slipping by the tight security the Hokage had placed around it, and if everything Naruto said was true, then perhaps Kakashi had underestimated another one of his students. Did Naruto want to beat Sasuke so badly that he was willing to be expelled from the village? Would he risk his entire career as a ninja just for one moment of victory? It was hard. Kakashi really could not relate to Naruto's plight. As a student in the academy, Kakashi had been more like Sasuke, that is, the best at everything. Finally, the white-haired Junin smirked. No, I'm not going to expel you. Naruto sighed in relief. Kakashi hopped down from his perch and stood beside Naruto. The technique you're trying to use is called the Rasengan, a powerful chakra attack that became famous because it was used by the fourth Hokage during the war. But as you may have realized, it's incredibly difficult to master, so difficult that almost no one else has bothered to learn it. But I have. Naruto exclaimed excitedly. I admit your progress is more than I would expect from a normal senior, but it's far from perfect. Kakashi reasoned. He consulted a small notebook that he extracted from one of the pockets in his green flak vest. And according to my grades, you need a perfect score on this assignment if you want to pass my class. Naruto groaned in dismay. Are you sure you don't want to choose a more reasonable technique? The Junin offered kindly. The young ninja shook his head adamantly, and despite himself, Kakashi grinned at Naruto's stubbornness. There was nothing wrong with Naruto's control of chakra, and all he needed to do was be logical for a change and choose a less advanced technique to guarantee a passing score. But a passing score was not what Naruto was after. Kakashi got the feeling that the blonde-haired ninja would sooner fail the class than to be shown up again by Sasuke. I don't suppose you could help me with it, Instructor Kakashi? Naruto asked. Kakashi shook his head, feeling guilty at the crestfallen look his student gave him. He was not lying to Naruto though. The technique he was training Sasuke in was one Kakashi had mastered, but the attack Naruto was planning on learning was so advanced that even the high-ranked Junin had never bothered to attempt it. I'll tell you what, Naruto, Kakashi said. There are only 2 men I know that have ever mastered the Rasengan, and that took them over 2 years. That's how difficult this technique is. You only have a month left. Are you positive that you want to learn? Who are they? Naruto interrupted eagerly. A resigned sigh escaped Kakashi's lips. He had a bad feeling about this, like he was about to inadvertently trigger a chain of events that would inevitably end in disaster. The first man was Yondaime, the fourth Hokage, who invented the technique. He's dead, the blonde-haired ninja said flatly. And the second, continued Naruto's instructor, is Jiraiya. Disbelief hit the young ninja like a 10-ton brick, and given a moment to ponder, Naruto would have preferred actually being physically hit than the reality of the terrible news that Kakashi had just imparted. What? Screamed Naruto. You're joking, right? But Kakashi was not laughing. Naruto did not know what to say. It just did not seem possible. The Rasengan, as Kakashi called it, was a technique that only advanced, highly qualified ninjas were supposed to be able to use, and when it came to Jiraiya, Naruto had trouble associating any of those attributes to the wizened ninja. Some people called Naruto a pervert for his devious classroom antics, but compared to Jiraiya, Naruto was a mere amateur in the voyeuristic world they both lived in. The perverted hermit, the nickname the blonde-haired ninja had given Jiraiya several years, seemed all too fitting considering the lecherous old man's peeping tendencies. The young ninja shuddered at the memory. He hated learning anything from the old ninja on the occasions Naruto had lessons with him. Half the time Jiraiya was completely hungover when he was supposed to be teaching, and the other half he was busy trying to look up the same skirts as Naruto. It was alright for Naruto to revel in his immaturity while he was young, but Jiraiya had run out of excuses for his childish antics a long time ago. He was supposed to be a grown-up, for crying out loud. Naruto cast a despaired glance at the open blue sky. Fate had a cruel sense of humor if that perverted drunk was actually qualified to teach anyone such a high-level technique. Kakashi peered at his pupil. Still sure you want to learn it? 3 weeks later, Naruto yawned and tried to keep his weary eyes open. It was fifth period, the last hour of class before they were all gloriously free from the bondage of academia. It was a terrible shame that the last class he was forced to sit through was by far the most tedious of the day. Every second seemed to stretch into an hour, and worst, their instructor, Yuhi Kurenai, refused to allow her students to sleep. The moment Naruto's eyes closed, she would chuck a piece of chalk at him to wake him back up. Previous painful experience had taught him as much. Stifling a yawn, the tired ninja glanced at the clock. Another 10 minutes before class finished. Already he had his escape route plotted out. When the bell rang, he would leap over the front of desks, spring off of Sasuke's desk, and then lunge for the doorway. If all went well and no one accidentally hit him in midair, Naruto would be able to make it to Konoha's training grounds before anyone else arrived. After all, his Rasengan still needed work. Getting the perverted old man to help him had been surprisingly easy. While the lecher had the reputation as a fearless, powerful ninja, it seemed the one person that could still frighten him was the fifth Hokage. It was rumored that as kids, Tsunade had once caught Jiraiya peeking on her at a public bathe and severely hospitalized him. After he recovered, the perverted ninja was left with an eternal fear of the Hokage's legendary strength and seldom dared to raise the ire of his former classmate. Armed with that knowledge, Naruto had tracked Jiraiya down to a singles bar in the Semir districts of Konoha and had asked the old man for help. Naturally, Jiraiya refused, and it was not until Naruto threatened to expose some of the old man's more devious activities to the Hokage did Jiraiya reluctantly agree. And even then, Naruto suspected the only reason why the elderly voyeur was not able to weasel his way out of that dilemma was because he was totally inebriated at the time. To be safe, the blonde-haired ninja recorded the conversation so that the next morning, when Jiraiya flatly denied agreeing to anything, Naruto had something to fall back on. Life never ceased to surprise Naruto when it came to understanding people. Jiraiya might have been the most depraved, perverted, disgusting old man in the entire country, but when it came to the matter of honoring one's word, he would not renege on his promise. As shocked and horrified as Jiraiya had been when faced with the recording, he begrudgingly conceded to help Naruto master the Rasengan. That had been 3 weeks ago. Naruto unconsciously glanced at his right hand. It was heavily bandaged from the countless burns that had formed from the weeks of relentless training. Molding chakra too often too quickly in the amounts necessary to conjure the Rasengan was dangerous to the user, as Naruto discovered on his own. Jiraiya later confessed the young ninja was lucky to have escaped with only severe burns. Better ninjas had lost limbs from overexerting themselves. Cursing silently under his breath, the wounded ninja rubbed his injured hand, scowling at the pain that even the slightest touch produced. It would take at least another couple days to heal completely, and in the meanwhile, Jiraiya had strictly forbade Naruto continue his training in fear of further damaging the boy's hand. The injury posed a severe threat to Naruto's chances of passing Kakashi's exam, which was only a week away. While Jiraiya confessed that Naruto's progress was astounding for a ninja only in their senior year, there was still had quite a ways to go before the perverted hermit would declare Naruto a master of the technique, and instructor Kakashi had already stated that he would accept nothing short of perfect for a passing grade. Naruto groaned miserably. His injury could not have come at a worse time too. Over the last few days, the young genin had finally gotten the hang of conjuring the Rasengan. He could effortlessly create a swirling ball of blue chakra, but his limited control over the technique meant it dissipated before he could actually use it. Still, the visible progress was encouraging. It would never pass Kakashi's stringent grading, but Naruto was confident that if he even had another week, he was certain he would master the Rasengan. But time was not on Naruto's side. It seldom was. When he wanted class to speed by, it would drag by agonizingly slowly, but if he needed more time, it had a tendency to accelerate to a point where the confused ninja would wonder where it went. The bandages would not come off for another 2 days, and Naruto needed the full week if he wanted to pass Kakashi's class and take one step closer to graduating with the rest of the year. It was an incredible dilemma. Either he needed to somehow accelerate the rate of his hand's recovery, or he would have to magically squeeze 2 extra days into the week. In other words, Naruto needed a miracle and fast. And so, 30 years later the barbarian horde from the Fire Country was successfully defeated by the fledgling ninja village of. Instructor Kurenai's voice resonated in Naruto's head, a noise echoing pointlessly in a cavernous space that just so happened to be the vacant spot where Naruto's brain should have been. He was exhausted from the strenuous training, and it wasn't just his hand that hurt. His entire body ached from the grueling abuse Naruto had forced it to silently endure, but now it was paying him back in spades. He couldn't even lift his pencil to take notes without every muscle in his arms screaming in protest, and so the weary ninja resigned himself to staring vacantly at the chalkboard, trying to make any sense of his instructor's history lesson. It was a futile gesture, truth be told. While memorizing dates and trivial facts came naturally to smart people like Shikamaru or Sakura, for Naruto, recalling even the most significant figures in history was an arduous effort that ended unsuccessfully most of the time. It was not that Naruto was stupid, he just did not care enough to learn. The fact that he averaged mediocre in classes like history or arithmetic did not bother the young ninja a great deal, however. Only those who wished to become historians, doctors or diplomats needed to maintain high scores in those sorts of courses. But for those who sought the life of a Konoha field operative like Naruto, only a diploma was required to certify the graduate as a qualified ninja. But even that diploma seemed unattainable at the moment with this thrice-damned injury. "Hey," Kyo whispered from the seat beside Naruto. "Where are Kiba and Asuka today?" A quick look around the classroom verified that Kyo was indeed correct. The seat that the loud-mouthed hound master usually occupied was vacant, and the red-haired archer was also nowhere to be seen. "Maybe they're sick," Naruto guessed. Kyo shook his head. "I haven't seen either of them for the last couple of days, not around the village either. It can't be a coincidence that they're both absent on the same day." "Think there's something going on between them?" asked the blonde-haired ninja eagerly. "You know, taking a little shared vacation with each other." The black-clad ninja shrugged. "Your guess is as good as mine. Something seems kind of strange though with the instructors. Like something is going on." Naruto nodded in agreement, but couldn't think of anything else to say on the matter. The rest of the class ended uneventfully, But when the bell rang, Instructor Kurenai called. Naruto, please come to my desk. The blonde-haired ninja stopped dead in his tracks, his legs still crouched in preparation for a jump he would never make. Fear struck at Naruto's heart, freezing the blood that pumped through his veins. Being called to an instructor's desk in Naruto's case was seldom a good thing. It either meant he was being rebuked for a poor mark or was being punished with extra lunch or latrine duty, and since the senior year had not been tested recently in Kurenai's class, Naruto logically concluded that he was in trouble for some transgression or another. The strangest thing was, the young ninja could not think of anything he had done recently that was worthy of punishment. He'd been so busy training for the last 3 weeks he really hadn't had the time. Naruto briefly entertained the idea of leaping through the window and escaping, but knowing Kurenai, she would probably have him in some weird illusion technique before he made it halfway there. Groaning in resignation, he climbed down from his chair and with all the mannerism of a man marching to the gallows, he plodded over to Kurenai's desk. What did I do this time, instructor? Naruto asked. Yuhi Kurenai was a young and exceptionally attractive Junin that had become an instructor at the academy only the year prior. She had curly black hair and wore the traditional vest and jumpsuit of a Konoha ninja. As Naruto stood before her desk, she looked at her pupil, her eerie crimson eyes eyeing him in an unnerving way that sent a shiver down the trouble-making ninja's spine. Who said you were in trouble? Kurenai asked. Because I swear that one time. Wait a minute. I'm not in trouble. No. Naruto sighed in relief. The Hokage asked you to meet her in her office in an hour from now, Naruto's instructor continued. And she wanted you to deliver the same message to Hyuga Hinata. You know her, correct? The younger ninja nodded. There were a billion questions he wanted to ask of Kurenai, but he knew his instructor would refuse to answer them before Tsunade determined it to be alright. It was very rare for a ninja to be invited to the Hokage, and it struck Naruto as very strange that two lowly genin would be extended the honor. The old lady probably wanted something from them, but what? The feisty Hokage didn't really seem the type to invite kids around for idle conversation. All the Hokage said was, "It's about your class field trip," Kurenai added. Class field trip. The senior year hadn't even begun planning their end of the year trip, and even if they had, Naruto would definitely not be one of the students planning it. The unofficial leaders of the year had already decided that a long time ago, back when they were in second grade. An excuse about an imaginary class trip was a clumsy lie, but the young genin couldn't decide whether it was the invention of Kurenai or the Hokage. As he walked out of the classroom and into the open hallways of Konoha High, Naruto came to a conclusion about one thing. Kyo was definitely right. Something was up. Hyuga Hinata stared listlessly at the white-painted walls of the small cubicle that served as the receptionist office in Konoha's hospital wing. The perpetual tick of the small clock on her desk was the only sound in the room, resounding loudly in the emptiness of the hospital's long corridors. She did not even have to look at the clock to know the time. She had been faithfully counting away the seconds ever since Instructor Shizune had ended their healing technique class early and left Hinata in charge. Normally this would have been a very prestigious duty for a ninja who had yet to graduate from an advanced course in healing, but it quickly became apparent why Shizune had little hesitation in leaving an underqualified ninja in charge of the hospital. It had been exactly an hour, 15 minutes and 32 seconds since Hinata had taken up her post at the receptionist's desk, and not a single soul had shown up yet. Sitting there, waiting for patients that would never come, was a monotonous chore at best and a grueling endurance of her sanity at worst. Why the hell didn't people get injured more frequently around this damn place? If only someone came in missing an arm or something, then Hinata would have an excuse to abandon her post to go summon Shizune. But the odds of that happening were so slim it made the Hyuga clan ninja why she bothered entertaining the morbid wish. If anyone was critically injured, a runner would have arrived already bearing word, and Shizune would be standing by with a team of medics. She drummed her fingers impatiently on the table. This was so annoying. Everything about this was so irritating it infuriated her. The pointless assignment combined with the sterile-smelling atmosphere of the hospital wing served to inflame the blistering rage that smoldered beneath the young girl's tranquil exterior. An unholy anger filled the ninja in training, blinding her vision with an impregnable veil of flames that seared her mind and soul with the embers of abhorrence and inferno of madness. But then it faltered. "Why am I so angry?" asked Hinata to the unresponsive silence. It was most unlike her to become so irritable about something as trivial as an unfavorable assignment. And then there was this morning when her younger sister, Hanabi, had asked to borrow a set of kunai to practice. Without thinking, Hinata had snapped angrily, reducing the little girl to tears. Hinata had felt horrible about the incident afterwards. Why had she reacted so violently? Her gaze traveled down the hallway and came to a rest on the green door at the end of the corridor. It was the same room where Naruto had been when he was injured 3 weeks ago. Hinata had been the receptionist then too, keeping a constant vigil over her friend's room, but lacking the courage to go inside and visit. Ever since their confrontation in the woods during Capture the Flag, whatever plans she had harbored to admitting her affection for the trouble-making ninja had evaporated. There was no telling what Naruto might think of her after passing out like that. He probably thought she was a fool and would laugh at her if she confessed her love. But hadn't she gone inside? Yes, she had. Later that day, Hinata had spotted Sakura enter Naruto's room. Emboldened by the arrival of her pink-haired friend, the Hyuga clan ninja crept to the doorway and, with sweating palms, turned the doorknob. The door opened and Hinata had nearly died at what she saw. She kissed him. She kissed him. She kissed him. That dirty, slut, tramp, streetwalking, low-life, two-timing, backstabbing, whore kissed him. The conflagration roared to life again, fueled by the wretched memory, and the pen Hinata had been holding in her hand suddenly snapped into two. Ink sprayed all over the brand new white shit she was wearing, but she did not care. Her fist clenched tighter around the fragmented pen, unaware of the pain in her hand as the plastic shards gouged into her flesh. A river of crimson seeped in between in her fingers, dripping steadily on the record book Hinata was supposed to be taking notes in. Sakura was supposed to be her friend. Her friend. She knew that Hinata had a crush on Naruto and was therefore off limits according to the unwritten laws of sisterhood that all the female ninjas in Konoha live by, but that apparently had not been enough to halt her brazen overtures on the man Hinata loved. And if Sakura's betrayal was not enough, the pink-haired girl had the audacity to lie to her in the locker room, feigning animosity towards Naruto only hours before throwing herself at him. What kind of friend would lie to another friend's face and then stab them back in the back? Apparently Haruno Sakura was that kind of friend. Hinata scowled angrily. She was not angry at Naruto for not fighting off Sakura's amorous advances. After all, because of Hinata's hesitance, he still had little if no idea of her true feelings for him. Admittedly, his obliviousness to this irritated her as she thought she had made it all too obvious on several occasions. The girls could see it, but Naruto was completely blind to her strong affection for him. But she supposed she would have to forgive him. He was male after all and, as a result, inherently obtuse. "Hello." A voice from outside the hospital wing called out. "Instructor Shizune." Hinata's heart skipped a beat and her eyes went wide in alarm. She knew that voice. Suddenly, she became very aware of the ink staining her shirt and the bloody pen that was clenched in her hand. Cursing her stupidity, she tossed the pen away and hastily tried to clean up before the door opened. Shunting aside the ache in her bleeding hand, Hinata frantically searched for some towels or a rag to mop up the mess. Being a hospital, there should have been plenty of those on hand. So naturally there were none in sight. The hospital door opened and Naruto stepped inside. He spotted Hinata. There was ink all over the blue-haired girl's face and shirt, and he could not help but notice the blood that covered the desk. Hurrying over to her, he removed a handkerchief from his pocket and offered it to his friend. You all right there, Hinata? Hinata stammered, blushing brightly. Embarrassment could not begin to describe the colossal shame that the young Hyuga clan ninja felt. She wanted to die right there and be spared the agony of enduring this humiliation. Of all the people in the village, why did it have to be Naruto who chose to walk into the hospital wing? This is it, Hinata thought miserably. I'm never going to win, Naruto like this. If he didn't think I was an idiot before, he certainly does now. I don't think you're an idiot, Naruto said kindly. He smiled and leaned over the desk and gingerly took her hand in his. A little clumsy maybe, but definitely not an idiot. Hinata gasped, partially out of surprise and partially from the unexpected touch of her fellow ninja's hand. What? I never said anything about me being an. Naruto winked roguishly, causing Hinata's protests to die away. Gently, he opened her palm and began carefully picking out the small pieces of plastic that had cut into Hinata's flesh. He worked in silence, pausing to toss away the fragments as he unearthed them. A particularly large chunk came out and a fresh trickle of blood began to spring forth from the wound. Hinata winced painfully. Sorry, Naruto apologized quickly. Maybe I should stop. No, Hinata interrupted quickly. I mean, no, you're doing just fine. She of course could not tell Konoha's resident troublemaker the truth. The mere touch of his hand made her forget all about the pain, washing away the trivial aches in a wave of euphoric bliss. The last thing she wanted was for him to let go. Naruto grinned and resumed his work. Why did you say I wasn't an idiot? Hinata wondered after a moment. I never said anything about that. The blonde-haired ninja shrugged. I guess I would have been thinking the same thing if our situations were reversed, he explained casually. Am I right? Hinata smiled and managed a nervous chuckle. You have such a strange way of surprising people. That's me, Naruto admitted proudly. Konoha's #1 ninja at surprising people. He removed the last shard from Hinata's hand and then unscrewed the cap from the canteen he carried with him. This will sting a little. The Hyuga clan ninja nodded and Naruto poured a small trickle of water over her bloody wound. Naruto was wrong. It did not sting a little. It hurt a lot, but the pain was brief and was nothing Hinata had not felt before. Gradually, it faded away, and by then Naruto had finished wrapping her hand up with his handkerchief. It isn't as good as a field bandage, he admitted. I can go get one. It's fine, Hinata said swiftly, gently stroking the soft fabric. This is fine. Thank you. No problem, Naruto replied. His eyes perked up as if he had just remembered something. Oh, I almost forgot. The Hokage wanted me to come get you. We're supposed to meet that cranky old lady for something or another. Hinata stared at her classmate, dumbfounded. She could only speculate how Naruto could speak so carelessly about something as important as a meeting with the Hokage. Only the most highly ranked ninjas and villagers were ever granted a private audience with Tsunade, and yet Naruto acted as if this was a casual lunch invitation with an old friend. She thought of rebuking her friend, but when she turned to address him, he was already heading towards the doorway. Naruto, Hinata called. Naruto stopped, his hands on the doorknob, and looked at Hinata. Drawing forth her last reserves of courage, she took a deep breath and said, "Do you mind if I walk with you?" Silence filled the hospital wing as Naruto regarded her. For a moment, Hinata almost thought he would say no and that she was a silly little girl and that he had no time for her. Nightmares had been filled with such terrible visages in sleepless nights before, and with dread the young girl anticipated their impending fulfillment. Her breath caught in her chest and for what seemed to last an eternity, Hinata dared not breathe lest even the slightest disturbance of the fragile silence would adversely affect Naruto's decision. But a smile formed across the boy's face. His hand extended out, and slowly, Hinata took it. Sure, Naruto said. Come on, let's go. There was a slight chill in the afternoon wind as Naruto and Hinata scaled the winding, circular staircase that lead up to the Hokage's office, and both of the ninjas wished they had dressed more appropriately for the cool climate. Springtime had faded faster than either had anticipated, and already the first signs of fall were visible. The leaves on the trees had lost their former lush splendor, whittling into pale shadows of their former beauty, and the sun set earlier these days. Gazing out towards the stone cliff that bore the visage of the Hokages, Naruto espied the sun escaping behind the vast monument. Before long, the last traces of light would disappear altogether, bathing the hidden village of Konoha in a voluminous blanket of darkness. Beside him, Hinata shivered as a cool gust of wind blew past. Noticing this, Naruto pulled off his jacket, and, before Hinata could protest, he draped it over both their shoulders to shield themselves from the breeze. The young girl blushed shyly, privately savoring the warmth provided not by the makeshift cape, but by the closeness to her friend. She resisted the urge to rest her head on his chest, to snuggle up to him like the furry animal he sometimes resembled. Glancing surreptitiously up at Naruto, Hinata decided that with his spiky blonde hair and the black whiskers that were drawn on his cheeks, he looked not unlike a fox or cat. Passing a pair of sentries outside of the Hokage's office, they hastily entered into the Tsunade's antechamber to escape the autumn chill. There was a roaring fire burning brightly in the stone fireplace, and Naruto was about to invite Hinata to partake in its warmth when Instructor Shizune suddenly appeared. She looked cross, though Naruto knew that was nothing really new. When on duty, Konoha High's medical instructor acted the part of a Junin, stern, severe and humorless, but Naruto knew that beneath the pretense of professionalism there was a kind-spirited personality. Naruto. Hinata. You're late, snapped Shizune irritably. The Hokage expected you 2 minutes ago. There definitely was a nice individual in there. It was just buried really deep and no one ever saw it. That's all. I'm sorry, Instructor Shizune. It was all Hinata began to apologize, but the short-tempered instructor waved off the young ninja off. Get inside now. Neither of the two ninjas waited for another invitation and they quickly pushed open the large double doors leading into the Hokage's office. It was a large, circular room and every inch of it was occupied. Mountainous stacks of papers littered the floor, leaning precariously as if they might topple at any moment, and the walls were adorned with so many charts and posters that none of the original wood paneling was visible. A giant desk added to the mess, resting in the middle of the office, and it too was covered with so much junk that it was hard to see the person sitting behind it. But Tsunade was not alone in her office. Sitting in a semi-circle ring around her desk was several of Hinata's and Naruto's classmates. The blonde-haired ninja was glad to see that Sakura and Tenten was there, though he was less than thrilled to spot Sasuke and Neji amongst them as well. They turned around at the sound of their entrance. Muttered greetings were exchanged and the two late arrivals took a seat next to their comrades. Tsunade leaned across her desk. I'm sorry I have had to call you on such short notice, but a situation has surfaced that needs Konoha's immediate attention. I have decided it's time for the senior class of Konoha High to participate in a B-rank mission. Naruto shot a startled look at the rest of his friends, and he was glad to see he was not alone in his shock. All of the genin looked startled by Tsunade's words. Even the normally passive Neji looked a little unsettled by the announcement. As genin, most of the senior class had undertaken dozens of D-rank missions and maybe even a few C-rank missions for the overachieving crowd, but B-rank missions were reserved only for Chunin. None of them were expected to be chosen for B-rank missions until well after they had graduated from the academy. As if to verbalize their worries, Sakura protested, but, Hokage, we're just seniors. We're not prepared to go on a B-rank mission. Really? Tsunade asked, sounding surprised. I've heard different from your instructors, particularly Instructor Kakashi. They seem to think the senior year is prepared to tackle the challenge of a B-rank mission. Or am I mistaken? No, Hokage, Sasuke said before Sakura could respond. You weren't mistaken. We're prepared. Sakura looked at her friend, the anxiety plain on her face. I don't feel. All of us are ready, Sasuke reiterated. Sakura doesn't know what she's talking about. But Sasuke, the pink-haired ninja, looked at Sasuke, like a lost puppy looking to their master for guidance, but Sasuke did not so much as acknowledge her presence. Meekly, she subsided into silence, not daring to contradict her crush's statement. Seeing this, Naruto shot Sasuke a murderous glare and stood up, pointing an angry finger at the young Uchiha. Shut up, Sasuke, he bellowed. You don't speak for Sakura or any of the rest of us. Sasuke scowled in Naruto's direction. Oh, it's the moron again. I was hoping you might be in the hospital with another broken neck. Wishful thinking. Sasuke. Naruto growled. Tsunade smashed her fist on her desk with an explosive crash that resounded around the room. That's enough, she yelled. I was told you were a group of responsible ninjas, but this display of immaturity clearly displays otherwise. Sasuke smirked triumphantly, little doubt in his mind who exactly the immature element in their group was. I'm not just talking about Naruto, Sasuke, Tsunade rebuked harshly. Sasuke snorted and crossed his arms disdainfully. Naruto is correct also. Sasuke, you do not speak for your teammates in this matter. Any member that does not wish to partake in this mission has the right to step down. Silence filled the room. Naruto glanced down the row at Sakura. He could almost feel the conflict within his friend, and wished he could go over there and comfort her through this dilemma. This was her call to make. On one hand, Sakura was the timid young girl, only a teenager who feared death and danger like anyone else, but on the other she had her loyalties to consider also. To stand down no would be to betray her classmates, a trespass that would not soon be forgiven. Finally, Sakura who spoke up. I'm prepared, Hokage, she said quietly. Tsunade smiled. I'm glad to hear that. Each of the ninjas assembled here have been handpicked because of your individual strengths and potential skills that might benefit the outcome of this mission. I understand you're all genin with limited field experience, so I'm assigning one of our most reliable Junin to supervise and coordinate the mission. Who is it? Naruto asked. As if perfectly on cue, the double doors of Tsunade's office sprang open, and Hatake Kakashi walked in, chuckling stupidly at some insipid joke he was reading from the pink novella he carried. He glanced up from the book and spotted the Hokage and his students staring at their instructor, mouths ajar in wordless horror. He hastily stowed away the book in his vest. Clearing his throat loudly, Kakashi closed the doors behind him and turned to face the assembly of ninjas. A monster attacked a maiden and I needed to rescue her, Kakashi offered. When no one seemed to readily accept this excuse, he added hopefully, a beautiful maiden. Everyone groaned. He's leading us, demanded Naruto incredulously. He's going to get us all killed. Kakashi chuckled and ruffled his loudmouthed critic's unruly blonde hair. No, just you, Naruto, he said cheerfully. Sorry about being late, Hokage. Please continue with the briefing. The fifth Hokage pressed on. This B-rank mission entails that a group of ninjas covertly infiltrate the city of Kakami that rests on the border of Leaf Country. You will pose as civilians and gather as much intelligence as you can on a suspected transaction that will occur approximately a week from now. What transaction? Queried Neji. And who are the parties involved? Our reconnaissance tells us that a large shipment of illicit contraband will be traded between two factions of the crime syndicate led by a man named Gato. Tsunade elaborated. You will shadow them, learn as much as possible, and then apprehend everyone involved when the deal goes down. The Hokage reached into a pile of papers and extracted several brown folders. She passed one to each of the genin. All operational information is stored in here. Commit it to memory and then destroy it. Tenten frowned as she leafed through her folder. Hokage, there are 7 of us. I'm guessing this won't be a standard 4-man per team mission. No, Tenten, Thank you for bringing that to my attention, the Hokage said. Because you will be posing as civilians, it is necessary for you to take on assumed identities. In a week's time, the Kakami holds an annual gathering of newlyweds at a sacred site just north of the city. Assuming the guise of newly married couples is the ideal cover, and because of that, a guy and a girl will be paired as a team throughout the city. Tsunade narrowed her eyebrows. I'm assuming you can all handle this maturely. Tenten and Sakura broke into fits of uncontrollable giggles, Hinata blushed, Naruto smiled broadly, and Neji and Sasuke maintained their normal indifferent stoicism. I didn't think so, the fifth muttered. Anyway, Instructor Kakashi has had some past experiences with the targets involved, so he will not be on the field until the time comes to raid the meeting in case he is identified. You will report all findings back to him. Sakura raised her hand. Hokage, if this is simply a reconnaissance and raid mission, why is it B ranked? Good question, Tsunade said approvingly. We know Gato is extremely wealthy and we're going to assume he's not going to cut corners on a deal this important. We're expecting him to hire at least 100 mercenaries for security, but don't be surprised if you run into a couple Chunin as well. Let me reiterate, she continued. This is a stealth operation. Do not confront the enemy or do anything rash that might compromise your cover. When the time comes, you genin will deal with the mercenaries while Kakashi handles any ninjas that Gato might have hired. Understood. Understood, the genin replied in unison. Excuse me, Hokage, Hinata whispered. You said intelligence. Who exactly is our intelligence? It's Asuka and Kiba, isn't it? Sasuke interjected before the Hokage could reply, stating his theory more than hypothesizing it. They've been absent for the last several days. Tsunade nodded, obviously impressed. Very good, Sasuke. Yes. Inuzuka Kiba and Mayumi Asuka were deployed last week and have been reporting back periodically. You'll rendezvous with them later. Instructor Kakashi, do you have anything you wish to add? Kakashi nodded and walked over to the Hokage's desk. Remember, for now we are not ninjas. Do nothing that indicates otherwise. While in the field, none of us know each other. Never, ever forget that. If your cover is blown, retreat to the indicated extraction points. If one of us is captured, do nothing to assist them. We only have one shot at this. Do not screw it up. He smiled. But I doubt anything like that will happen. The worried stares that some of the genin gave him indicated otherwise. Tsunade stood up from her seat and her students followed suit. You will be departing from the village at 0700 hours tomorrow morning. I suggest you spend the time taking it easy and gathering your strength, but I know you're not going to listen to me. In that case, enjoy your night. There was an old saying amongst ninjas that went, live this day like the last, a somewhat depressing reminder that once a ninja left the sanctuary of the village, anything could happen. The battlefield was so unpredictable. It was encouraged for a ninja to take the time to enjoy life before a mission. Spend time with their family, close up loose ends and the such. Bring some closure to their life in case things went horribly wrong during their assignment. Go have some fun, Tsunade said. That's an order. Several hours had passed since their briefing with the Hokage and night had fallen, covering the hidden ninja village in a veil of star-speckled blackness. Hitaki Kakashi had always preferred the darkness over daytime ever since he was recruited into the ranks of Anbu, and the opinion remained even 4 years after his resignation from the elite, Black Ops organization. Even though he no longer relied on the night to conceal his movements and hide him from his enemies, Kakashi found that he enjoyed the quiet and tranquility that the nocturnal setting inspired. With most of the villagers asleep in their beds, the almost palatable silence was a welcome change of pace from the usual hectic chaos that dominated the village during the daylight hours. The mysterious Junin found he could actually think uninterrupted during these times. He glanced up at the dark sky with his one eye and then returned his gaze to the obsidian tablet that rested in the middle of an open field. It was a large monument erected in honor of all the ninjas that had sacrificed their lives for Konoha, and all the names of the fallen were etched into the face of the stone block. He did not need to read through the list. He had memorized the names on the memorial a long time ago. But he did so anyway, visualizing the faces of the ninjas he had known as he recited their names in his head. Sugihara Toji, Yamagiwa Musashi, Hanaoka Kimiko, Chisato Yasuko. All were Chunin or Junin who had died in black operations for Anbu. Aside from Kakashi, who had been their captain during those missions, only the Hokage and a few select members knew the specifics behind their deaths. Yondaime, Rin. Yondaime had been Kakashi's mentor and team leader during the white-haired Junin's formative years. Rin had been a medical ninja assigned to Kakashi's team. Both had given their lives to save the village from the Kyuubi. Rin had died while going on a suicide mission to rescue a squad that had been ambushed by the demonic fox, and Yondaime had finally sacrificed himself to seal away the Kyuubi inside Naruto. Both had been more than comrades to Kakashi. They had been friends. Uchiha Obito. Kakashi touched the name, slowly tracing the outline with his finger. No one could see the sorrow welling inside the Junin, just as none could see the tear forming in his eye. Sorry, Obito, he whispered. You deserved better. A sudden noise from behind Kakashi alerted the instructor of the presence of a newcomer, but he did not turn around. With his superb hearing, he could identify a person based solely on their unique gait, and the person who had interrupted his private mourning was no different. Hello, Yugao, Kakashi said, his gaze never leaving the memorial. A lithe, young woman with long purple hair came to stand beside Kakashi. She wore the traditional black jumpsuit and accompanying white body armor, typical Anbu uniform, but her face did not hide behind the painted animal mask associated with the elite military force. She smiled at Kakashi, a pretty sort of smile that made her striking attractive features all the more apparent. Good evening, Captain, she replied, saluting Kakashi. Azuki Yugao had been a junior Anbu operative at the peak of Kakashi's career in Konoha's Black Operations Unit. When Kakashi left the unit, his reputation followed him, and it was not unusual for his former comrades to still respectfully salute him as their captain whenever they ran into each other. Kakashi sighed. I'm retired from Anbu. I'm no longer your captain. He gave her a sideways glance. In fact, I hear you've recently been promoted to captain yourself. Yugao smiled sweetly. I'll never be as good of a captain as you, sir. Well, it's hard to compete with legends, I suppose, Kakashi admitted. Looking at Yugao's innocent smile, he involuntarily shuddered. It was a facade, a pretense to disguise her true nature. Deep inside, beneath the friendly exterior, lurked a natural-born killer, the person Kakashi had once been 4 years ago. Just as Yugao had heard the stories of him, he too had heard reports of Yugao's talent on the battlefield. Already she was accredited for over 50 enemy kills. What are you doing out here at this hour anyway? He asked. That beautiful, perfect smile never wavered as Yugao said, I came to visit Hayate. It's been too long since I paid my respects. Kakashi searched the memorial until he found the name of Gecko Hayate. He had been a Junin and Yugao's fiancé several years ago, but had died during the war before they could be wed. The white-haired Junin stuffed his hands in his pockets. I'll leave you alone then, Kakashi said. He turned and began to walk away when Yugao placed her hand on his shoulder. He looked inquiringly at the pretty Anbu operative. I hear you're going on a mission tomorrow. Sure you haven't lost your edge, sir? She asked. She was teasing him, but there was something else hidden within the playful jibe. Worry perhaps. Fear. Don't worry. I'll make do. The enigmatic Junin said. Yugao nodded. It was apparent his answer did not satisfy her, but she wasn't about ready to appear insubordinate to a man who had once been her captain. While it was true that Kakashi had retired years ago, the reputation he had established was eternal. She would just have to trust him. Good luck, Captain. And if you get into trouble, my squad is always at your disposal. The academy instructor grinned. He knew Yugao's promise was an empty one. By tomorrow morning, the Hokage would have Yugao's squad running missions in a different country and in no position to give Kakashi assistance should he need it. Still, the thoughtful offer was a nice gesture, one that Kakashi deeply appreciated. It was always good to know people cared. A tale for the pretty young lady in pink, the waiter said with a polite smile. Sakura thanked the young man and pushed him a few coins. She picked up her drink, a sparkling blue mix, and took a sip. It was bittersweet and tasted terrific. But then again, this was one of the fanciest nightclubs in all of Konoha. For the exorbitant price she just paid for her drink, it had better be good. The connection was a popular hangout spot for young people, both ninjas and villagers, in Konoha. It was a large dome-like structure that was lavishly furnished with expensive fur sofas. On the stage near the entrance, a live band was busy playing the latest hits from rock country, filling the nightclub with the explosive ambiance created by the group's twin electric guitars and piano accompanist. A gorgeous blonde thing, who Sakura immediately hated, was singing, turning every ear in the club at the sound of her melodious voice. Sakura took another sip of her expensive drink. It was strange. Usually it took considerable haggling and a large bribe in order for the bartender to overlook the fact that the academy students who frequented the club were underage, but tonight, the group had been served their drinks without question. It was almost as if they had been expecting them. Privately, she considered that perhaps the Hokage had arranged this as her personal way of sending off the next generation of ninjas on their first B-ranked mission. It was impossible to tell with that old lady sometimes. Sitting on the couch was Naruto and Hinata. They were chatting about something, or more specifically, Naruto was doing all the talking while the smitten Hinata nodded her head but did little to add to the conversation. In front of the band, several young couples were engaged in a fast, swaying series of gyrations, and Sakura spotted Tenten attempting to coerce Neji to dance with her. Suffice to say, she was failing miserably. Just once, please, Neji. Tenten begged. No, this is stupid. Replied Neji stubbornly. Look at those two over there. He pointed to a couple who had apparently become a little too frisky in their dancing and now occupied themselves snogging the living daylights out of each other on the dance floor. Have they no decency? It's fun. Whined Tenten. No, refused the Hyuga clan ninja. Sakura chuckled, but her laughter died quickly when she recalled her success, or lack thereof, with the man she was chasing after. Uchiha Sasuke sat on the barstool next to her, slamming down a shot glass full of potent liquor. He exhaled deeply after he drained the glass content and then pushed it into a progressively growing pile of emptied glasses. You should slow down, Sasuke. Sakura cautioned. Sasuke shrugged and ordered another round of shots. Sakura looked at her friend with concern. Something was bothering Sasuke. They had only been at the club for about 20 minutes and the young Uchiha was already well on his way to becoming drunk. He normally never drank this hard, and Sakura doubted it had anything to do with the mission the next morning. He had been too confident in the Hokage's office for it to have been merely a show of false courage. So what could be bothering him? She sighed softly, deciding that dressing up for tonight had been a complete waste of time. Sakura was wearing a new pink dress and Ino had helped her apply her makeup so perfectly that she guaranteed her that any guy would fall for her. So naturally Sasuke had not noticed how nice Sakura looked. Others had noticed, however. A few guys had even asked Sakura to dance, but she had refused so that she could remain by Sasuke's side. I think you should listen to the girl, punk, an unpleasant voice from behind the two ninjas said. Standing a few meters away were three men, big and muscular. They wore expensive clothing, but since they did not bear the forehead protector of a ninja, Sakura guessed they were probably thugs working for a wealthy gang. Yeah, said one of the three. You should leave. Before. Yeah, leave. Sakura groaned. The burly villagers were obviously drunk as well. Normally villagers would know better than to mess with anyone bearing the forehead protector of a Konoha ninja, but for these men, in their inebriated state, rational thinking probably was the last thing on their mind. They were intoxicated and looking for a fight. It was unfortunate that they had found Sasuke. Hey pretty boy, I'm talking to you, the thug slurred. Sasuke smirked arrogantly, that same confident smirk that he always wore, and turned away from them. It was a pompous gesture, one that belayed the sort of disgust that the young Uchiha no doubt felt towards the villagers, and even drunk it was impossible for the thugs to miss the implied insult. Sasuke, be careful, Sakura warned. We can't use any ninja techniques while. Don't worry, Sakura, Sasuke muttered. I know what I'm doing. Hey, roared another one of the thugs. He poked Sasuke hard in the back of the head. Slowly, Sasuke turned and glared at the men. There was murder in his eyes, and anyone in their right mind would have seen that and taken it as a sign to run. Fast. Do that again and I'll break your face. Snarled Sasuke, venom dripping from every word. Oh, that does it. One of the drunken thugs grabbed Sasuke by the collar of his shirt, but the young Uchiha was ready. With lightning fast reflexes, Sasuke grabbed the thug's wrist and twisted it violently. A loud crack exploded as bone and muscle tore and the man screamed, a shrill sound that echoed in the nightclub and drew the attention of the rest of its patrons. The music faltered. The drunk immediately let go and backed away, sobbing and cradling his mutilated hand. Bastard. One of the injured man's friends swore. He grabbed a half-full liquor bottle from the bar and lunged at Sasuke. The young Uchiha easily dodged the clumsy blow and struck his attacker's wrist. The bottle popped free from the man's grasp, and Sasuke snagged it from the air before smashing it into the side of his assailant's head. The liquor bottle exploded in a shower of broken glass and booze, and the drunk, his face a bloody mess, dropped to the ground. Sasuke whirled to face the last of the drunks. Who's next? He screamed. Having seen his two friends defeated, the last of the three men sobered up remarkably quickly. He turned around and ran, pushing his way through the crowd of spectators who had come to watch the brawl. The young Uchiha laughed. He returned to his seat, downed another shot glass, and tossed it haphazardly behind him. During the entire engagement, Sakura had just sat there, too terrified to come to the aid of her friend. Slowly, she looked at her friend. Sasuke, are you alright? She whispered. Sasuke nodded, his head rolling loosely down onto his chest as he did so. A single glance told everyone that the Uchiha was drunk as hell. He was practically swaying on his bar stool and his eyes were unfocused as he looked at Sakura. Yeah, I'm fine, Sakura. You're bleeding, the pink-haired ninja pointed out. She grabbed Sasuke's hand and inspected it. A small stream of blood had formed on his flesh from where a shard of glass had punctured it. It was a shallow cut, but if not treated properly it could leave a nasty infection. I'll live, Sasuke muttered. He took another shot and slammed the glass on the bar hard enough to break it. Cursing incoherently, he tossed the broken glass aside. Suddenly, Neji was beside the two ninjas. He did not say anything, but merely pointed towards the front door of the bar where two security ninjas had just entered. One of the waiters was speaking with them, and Sakura noticed they were looking in the direction of the bar quite frequently. No doubt someone had reported the fight and the police were here to make the appropriate arrests. It's time to leave, Sasuke, Sakura whispered. When Sasuke's only response was to order another shot of liquor, she shook him hard and said louder, we have to leave now. The young Uchiha glared menacingly at her, causing Sakura to freeze in place. A cold fear descended over the pink-haired ninja, gripping her heart in an icy vice of terror as she contemplated that perhaps she had gone too far in approaching Sasuke. She knew he would never hurt her, but men blinded by the haze of intoxication were prone to act in manners unlike that of their normal selves. Sakura winced, waiting for him to hit her like he had done to the drunken thugs, but the blow never came. Instead, Sasuke calmly took another shot glass from the bartender, drank it in a single gulp, and then pulled Sakura towards him and engulfed her lips with his own. Sakura was so shocked by the unexpected kiss that she did nothing to resist it. It was a violent kiss, brutal and animalistic without any pretense of civility. It hurt her lips as Sasuke's mouth pressed firmly against hers, and yet a brilliant light of ecstasy blinded her to pain. It was true that Sasuke might not be in his right mind, but this single blissful moment, this single kiss was the fruition of all her dreams, and Sakura savored it selfishly. She drank it in until her head swam with pleasure, and even when the young Uchiha finally pulled away, Sakura craved for the warming touch of his lips once more. Like the servant to whimsical desires of her idolized god, she pined for his divine touch if only for one more second. "Let's go," Sasuke said, the pungent smell of alcohol on his breath. Sakura just nodded and allowed herself to be led out of the club. Once the two had departed, a pair of bouncers arrived to drag the unconscious men outside. The band resumed their playing, and interest in the fight faded away as music once again filled the club. Fights were commonplace. It was nothing more than a transitory thrill to liven up the night. Within moments of Sasuke and Sakura's leaving, the connection had returned to normal. Naruto looked at Hinata, completely bewildered. "What the hell just happened?" he asked. Hitaki Kakashi disliked rain. It was a type of weather he categorized with hurricanes, tsunamis and tornadoes parts of life, but ones he could definitely do without. The enmity between the Konoha Junin and the unfavorable weather was mutual. Just as Kakashi loathed rain, the rain also seemed to have something against him as well. Something bad always seemed to happen to the white-haired ninja on rainy days. Take the safe house for instance. Kakashi looked around. The safe house that the Hokage had selected for his team to operate out of while in was the second floor of a local antique shop and was more or less an apartment that looked like someone had begun renovating it, but changed their mind halfway through. The walls were a mural of mixed colors, none of which matched, and the windows were boarded up with pieces of cardboard. No electricity ran to the room either, Kakashi discovered after pressing the switch to a non-existent light fixture, and the multitude of cracks in the roof leaked in the rainwater from outside. The pervasive stench of mold lingered in the apartment, and it would only get worse once the rain let up. The white-haired Junin sighed at the depressing state of the new living quarters he would have to endure for the next several weeks. He was tempted to rent a room at a nice inn and file the cost under miscellaneous when he reported the team's expenses, but the Hokage would probably ask for receipts to justify each and every expenditure Kakashi had made on behalf of Konoha. The old lady could be such a stickler when it came to money. "Thanks, Tsunade," he muttered, stalking back into the living room. The only touch of civilization that graced the dismal apartment was a large stack of boxes that contained his team's equipment. Inside were maps, weapons, and communication transponders that Kakashi would have to unpack and set up before the first of the genin teams arrived in Kakami. The white-haired Junin glanced at his watch. He still had more than an hour. With that in mind, he plopped himself down on the apartment's only piece of furniture, an old dilapidated sofa, extracted the pink novella from his vest, and began to read. To the casual observer, the young man and woman that strolled into the Paradise Hotel that rainy afternoon were no more than another set newlyweds, no doubt the son and daughter of some rich trading tycoon if their gaudy apparel was any indication. The man had blonde, spiky hair and wore a black suit made of the finest material imported all the way from Cloud Country. His wife, a pretty little thing with short, dark blue hair, was dressed equally as extravagant in a low-cut silk dress that shimmered in the hotel chandelier's artificial light. Behind them, carrying their luggage and shielding them with their umbrellas from the rain, was the hotel staff, eager to accommodate their new, wealthy clients. Uzumaki Naruto tried not to smile at the charade. His partner, Hyuga Hinata, stood beside him, her arm linked with his as they walked toward the front desk. He felt awkward wearing such expensive clothing. The jacket alone cost more than his meager stipend as a genin made him in a year, but the money had been provided by the Hokage, and it seemed foolish to leave it unspent. They were acting the part of an affluent couple, it made sense to dress like it too. That and the damn outfit itched like mad. He resisted the urge to scratch where the fuzzy collars rubbed uncomfortably against his neck, drawing inspiration from the cool, composed way Hinata was performing. She did not seem the least perturbed by all the attention they were receiving, as if the fawning and pampering by all these servants was normal. Naruto had to continually remind himself not to offer to help the poor hotel employee with their bags. Please tell the manager that Mr. and Mrs. Mimura are here, Hinata said. And that we require the finest suite in your hotel. I'm sorry, Mrs. Mimura, the employee behind the desk said nervously. But I'm afraid you need a reservation if. Hinata reached into her purse and dropped a large pouch full of coins on the counter. It clattered loudly, echoing throughout the hotel and instantly silencing the clerk. This is my reservation, she sneered haughtily. Need I say more? I will lead you to your rooms at once, said the clerk, greedily eyeing the heavy bag of money. Please, follow me. The clerk led Naruto and Hinata up several flights of stairs until they reached an elaborate-looking red door. It was far removed from the rest of the rooms. Hinata guessed its remoteness from the rest of the hotel's clientele was intentional, no doubt to nullify the volume produced by a newlywed couple's amorous love-making, but for the two ninjas its privacy would serve a more practical purpose. With any luck, they would be able to come and go from the hotel without being seen by any of the guests or staff, and thus reducing the chances of their faces being remembered. On a stealth operation, familiarity with anyone other than your teammates was never a good thing. The clerk fished into his pocket and removed a gold key. He opened the door and then stepped aside, allowing Hinata to curiously peek through. It was a large room, lavishly furnished with expensive pieces of decorative art that was conducive more to the atmosphere of wealth and riches than any actual aesthetic beauty. Their room was undeniably beautiful, but nothing exceptional. Having grown up in a wealthy family with their own private estate, Hinata was well acclimated to the finer aspects of life. Wow, Naruto whispered to Hinata. Pretty swanky. Hinata suspected her friend was dying to say more, or worse, itching to explore the room not unlike a child in their first museum. But thankfully, he was able to control himself. On their way to Kakami, Hinata was glad she had taken the opportunity to brief Naruto on what to suspect from their room in case he blew their cover. They were supposed to be a wealthy couple and Naruto's acting like a mere commoner would rouse suspicion. Naruto took Hinata's hand and together they walked in. Everything seems to be in order, Hinata said, adopting an air of sophisticated snobbery that all rich people seem to use. She reached into her purse again and withdrew a handful of coins which she tossed to the clerk. You may leave now. After the clerk had closed the door behind him when he left, Naruto grinned and leapt on the bed, bouncing on the springy mattress like a playful child. He looked at Hinata and with a teasing grin he said, You seem pretty used to ordering people around. The heir of the Hyuga clan blushed embarrassedly. Merchants come to visit my clan estate all the time and that's the way they talk to their servants. It's quite degrading really. Yeah, being rich kind of sucks, laughed Naruto. He tugged at the irritable collar. Especially the clothes. I don't know how you people stand wearing these things. Hinata smiled. She remembered the first time she had to wear the lavish kimonos of the Hyuga clan during a wedding for a cousin. They were so hot and heavy that she had passed out from the heat in the middle of the ceremony, interrupting it for a half-hour while medical ninjas rushed to revive the young girl. Her father had been livid with Hinata and forced her to wear the kimono until she could wear it without fainting. You can take it off while we're in the room, Hinata suggested, not quite realizing the implication of her words until a second later when Naruto nodded in agreement. Good idea, he said, hastily stripping off the offending jacket and undershirt, leaving the young genin shirtless on the bed. Hinata gasped and turned away, blushing madly. That wasn't really what she meant at all, though that nagging, inner part of her personality wasn't really complaining about the miscommunication. Don't look. It's not polite, her conscience told her. Look, he's doing it on purpose. The more corrupt, moral-less side of her countered. No, he just misunderstood you. Are you joking? He's a guy, but he's not a complete idiot. He wants you to look. Well, I guess if you put it that way. Okay, fine. But only for a second. It was unnerving how easily her conscience had given into temptation. It was pathetic performance really, a gesture of resistance more than a concerted effort. But once again, the wicked side of Hinata that she suppressed daily had emerged if only briefly, and before her conscience could mount a second attempt at persuading the morally conflicted ninja against stealing a peek, Hinata slowly turned her head. It wasn't the first time she had seen him shirtless. On a few occasions she had watched from afar while he and the other guys went swimming, but never had she seen him bare-chested so close. Like most of the other ninjas, Naruto was well-toned, every muscle in his abdomen apparent. He had the body of an athlete more than a fighter, built for speed and grace, not strength. Gorgeous, Hinata whispered. Era, Naruto queried. What did you say, Hinata? Flushing a brilliant shade of red, the young Hyuga quickly looked away again. Nothing, she said shyly. Hastily, she did her best to recover her lost composure. I suppose we should set up our things. Naruto agreed and together they spent the next 15 minutes unpacking their luggage. It was mostly clothing, more of the same expensive attire they would need to hold up their illusion of prosperity, but secreted away in hidden compartments was the ninja equipment they had smuggled past village customs. Together, they set up a variety of anti-intruder seals which they placed against the door and windows, and then began stashing away kunai, shuriken's various tools of the trade underneath cushions, in flowers pots and other strategic positions. A good ninja was a ready ninja, and a ready ninja always had a weapon nearby. In the occasion that they should be ambushed in their rooms, both of them would have a tactical advantage of knowing where to locate weapons. After they were finished, Naruto sat down on the bed. A moment later, a thought came to the young genin, and sheepishly, he ran a hand through his hair. Hinata, he called anxiously. I just realized there's, well, only one bed. Hinata nodded, not daring to look at her friend in the eye in case she fainted again out of sheer embarrassment. She had noticed the same dilemma as Naruto hours earlier, minutes after they had been assigned to the same team, and during the long journey to Kakami she had been mulling the problem over in her head. Tapping her two index fingers together, a gesture she was known to perform when nervous, Hinata murmured something under her breath. Well? Hinata asked hopefully. Hinata, I have no clue what you just said. Naruto replied blankly. Again, slower this time. Trying to ignore how hot her face had become, Hinata said in a barely audible whisper, I suppose we could share the bed. She said this so incredibly quickly that Naruto was still not completely certain he had heard her correctly. Had she just suggested they share the same bed? The timid, shy Hinata had dared to offer something so bold. Naruto opened his mouth to reply, but nothing came out. He was at a loss for words, a definite first for the loud-mouthed ninja, and he quickly became aware of how awkward the silence felt. Her suggestion was definitely not without its appeals. Hinata was on Naruto's hot girls of Konoha High list after all. But there were other definite factors to consider before taking the young Hyuga up on her offer, not the least of which was that Hinata belonged to an extremely wealthy family and had an insanely overprotective father. If word ever got out about this, Naruto definitely did not want to have to answer to a man who was renowned for killing assassins with a single strike. The other element of this equation that stupefied the blonde-haired ninja was why Hinata was even contemplating something so risque and socially inappropriate. He scratched his chin, trying to buy some time. Hinata didn't even like him the last time he checked. He talked with her off and on, and it was true he had been a bit more forward in flirting with the purple-haired ninja over the last month, but nothing to warrant Hinata falling in love with him so abruptly. Right. It wasn't like Hinata had been nurturing some childhood crush on him all this time. He wasn't that oblivious. Nah, don't worry about it, Naruto said casually, finally deciding that Hinata was just trying to be polite. I'm used to sleeping on the floor. Thanks for offering, though. Hinata stared at her friend for a long moment, her mouth hanging open in shock at the rejection. She inhaled deeply in a futile effort to console her crushed heart, but her devastated feelings would have none of it. Tears of anger sprang to her eyes, streaming down the side of her face, and deep inside, something snapped. Maybe it was all that suppressed anger. Or maybe it was all these years of unrequited affection. Or maybe it was just the stress from the anxiety of their first mission. Whatever it was, it made poor Hinata's delicate psyche snap. I've had it. Hinata screamed loud enough to make Naruto jump. Why had she fallen in love with such an idiot? Why couldn't this brainless moron tell how much she loved him? How was it possible was this ignorant buffoon could not pick up on her most overt attempts to display her affection? It had been 10 years since she decided that she loved Naruto, and this stupid lout still could not even acknowledge her most forward endeavors to win his heart. Why do you have to be so dumb? She yelled at Naruto. Hinata wanted to hit him, to slap him, to kick him in the shin as hard as she could, anything that might awaken this incompetent dimwit to her feelings for him. Naruto cautiously approached the infuriated young girl. Hinata, he ventured, carefully putting his hand on her shoulder. Don't touch me, she shouted. Roughly pushing his hand away, Hinata grabbed her purse and bolted for the door. She paused in the doorway, glaring at Naruto with undisguised malice. I hate you, she cried. And with that she was gone. The confused genin just stood there for a few minutes, trying to figure out what had just happened. More importantly, he needed to figure out why Hinata had just gotten so mad at him. He didn't think he had said anything to provoke such an angry reaction, but then again, Hinata was a girl, and girls were innately irritable creatures prone to such hostile behavior. She couldn't help being so illogical and violent, but this unique turn of events did put Naruto in another difficult situation. He looked out the window and once again took notice of the heavy rain pouring outside. Right now, if Hinata had gone outside like Naruto assumed she would, she was no doubt both angry and miserable. He could only imagine what rain did to that tight dress of hers. Wonderful things probably, but the question was whether or not Naruto was willing to confront her wrath once again to find out. Naruto sighed. He thought Sakura was the only one who got so mad and irrational when offended. Apparently all girls were like that. Maybe Shikamaru was right about the Pharaoh. How troublesome, indeed. God damn it, Naruto snarled, kicking the bed. On the other side of the city, Hyuga Neji stared silently into the outside world from where he sat on the floor beneath the windowsill. It was still raining hard, torrents of rain falling freely from the ominous gray heavens, and there was little indication that it would be letting up soon. He frowned at this observation. He had wanted to do a little reconnaissance of the city before their first check-in with instructor, but the tourists he and Tenten were portraying would have little excuse to be scouting around Kakami with this torrential rain outside. The streets were bare of its usual pedestrians, and it would look more than a little odd if someone spotted two strangers roaming about when everyone else had wisely gone indoors to wait out the storm. Still raining, huh? Tenten observed, peeking over the miniature stove that the room was equipped with. She had begrudgingly surrendered her trademark jumpsuit for a simple brown skirt and green blouse, attire more endemic to the area, and her black hair was braided into pigtails that draped down her back. Neji nodded. He was wearing a pair of gray trousers and a loose black tunic, and his long hair fell freely down the side of his face. Both of them had left their forehead protectors back in Konoha, eliminating any trace of their village affiliation. The beautiful markswoman emerged from the room's small kitchen bearing 2 cups of steaming coffee. She handed one to Neji, who graciously accepted it. They drank the hot brew in silence, both watching the peaceful cascade of rain outside. "Why do you think they chose us as a team?" Tenten asked. Neji took another sip of the coffee. It was hot enough that it burned his tongue and threatened to melt his lungs as it traveled down his throat. "Perfect. The Hokage must think we work well together." "Think so?" she mused. The young Hyuga thought for a second and then slowly nodded. "We both cooperate effectively with one another." This comment made Tenten beam happily. Neji saw, and this caused him an unexplainable feeling of unease. He had not meant to imply any sort of connection linking the two ninjas together aside from their common loyalties to Konoha, and even Tenten's slightest indication of satisfaction hinted towards a potential miscommunication. Neji certainly did not want that, particularly not in the middle of their first B-ranked mission, and momentarily entertained the idea of establishing the limitations of the strictly business relationship they shared. He wanted to tell her she was nothing more than an ally and he appreciated her talents, but not necessarily her company. He wished to make it completely clear that he was not interested in her any further than the mission entailed necessary. But he didn't, because it would have been a lie. Truth be told, Neji's thoughts had continually returned to Tenten with alarming frequency over the last month. It was all because of the injury, the gash on his arm where Tenten's kunai had penetrated his kaiden. The projectile had torn a ligament in his arm, and the healing process was taking longer than the medics had predicted. He could still operate at full capacity, but using his wounded arm still hurt. The pain reminded him not so much of his failure on the battlefield, but of the girl who had caused the injury, the girl who had the wit and ability to pull one of Hyuga Neji. Every time he used his arm, the pain reminded him of her. His mouth twisted into a disgruntled scowl as he looked out the window. This was a distraction he did not need right now. Neji had always prided himself on his ability to remain calm and focused regardless of the situation, but Tenten's presence disrupted his concentration. He almost wanted to ask Instructor Kakashi to switch the teams so that he could focus more on the mission, yet that was the last thing he wanted to do as well. For the first time, his heart was rebelling against what his mind told him. Common sense dictated that he switch teams for the sake of the mission, but his emotions refused to let him do so. "How is your arm doing?" Tenten asked curiously. Neji shrugged and concisely said, "It's healing. I still have bruises thanks to you," the young markswoman said, grinning. "It still hurts like hell to lie down on my stomach." "You did say you didn't want me told hold back," the young Hyuga reminded her. "Yeah, well, you surprised me, I must admit. Don't think you'll be so lucky next time. I look forward to it." Tenten edged her head sideways. "Really?" she asked curiously. She could not recall Neji ever expressing interest in doing anything ever. He usually just went ahead and did it without consulting anyone else. "It's been a long time since anyone has injured me," Neji replied, tapping his wounded arm meaningfully. "You're the first one to show the potential to actually defeat me." Her classmate's bold arrogance made Tenten chuckle. For a moment it almost sounded like Neji was softening a bit, revealing the humane interior hidden away buried beneath his icy personality. It was nice knowing that he wasn't the soulless robot that many perceived Neji to be, but there was something unique about his stern persona that appealed to Tenten. While many of the other girls had been driven away by Neji's indifferent attitude towards others, Tenten found herself strangely attracted by it nonetheless. It also helped he was absolutely gorgeous and brilliant. That also might have contributed somewhat to Tenten's liking for the young Hyuga. She walked over towards where Neji sat and placed her hand on his shoulder. He looked up at her questioningly. There was something oddly comforting about her touch. It had a warm, soothing presence that radiated its own glow of optimism in contrast to the grim, gloomy weather outside. His instinctive reaction was to draw away from her hand, to pull himself in a protective shell void of any interfering influences, but gradually he relaxed and somehow his own hand found its way on top of hers. Don't think of taking advantage of me, Hyuga Neji, Tenten teased lightly. Neji snorted derisively. You wish. The young girl smiled. Yeah, she thought to herself, I do. I'm not sure this is such a good idea, Sasuke. Sakura mentioned for the third time in the space of the last 10 minutes. She was under no illusion that this time would prove any more successful in dissuading her stubborn partner than the last two, and predictably she was correct. Sasuke, who walked beside her under the umbrella they shared, merely shrugged dismissively, an acknowledgement that he had heard her, but no indication that he actually cared. The pink-haired ninja frowned and trudged through the ankle-deep, murky rainwater on the streets to keep up with Sasuke. She wished she had thought to change out of the red dress and high heels she had been wearing before going out into the rain. Sasuke, however, had selected to remain in the elaborate clothing the Hokage had provided for the sake of the mission, and Sakura was slightly comforted by the fact. Sasuke was never wrong, and if he decided to do something, it was for a very good reason. But even then, Sakura could not shake the nagging feeling of doubt about her friend's latest choice. It was foolish, unnecessary, irresponsible, and most importantly, dangerous. To anyone else she would have spoken her mind already in great length and volume, but how could she summon the courage to reproach the man she so devotedly lionized? Shouldn't we wait for Instructor Kakashi or the others? Sakura asked cautiously. The last thing she wanted to do was accidentally upset Sasuke, but then again, neither did she really wish to persist in this foolish and potentially suicidal course of action. I told you, Sakura, Sasuke explained patiently. Instructor Kakashi told us we're on our own. That means gathering intelligence as well. The sooner we acquire important information, the sooner we'll be able to make our move and get out of here. Sakura bit her lip, uncertain of what to say. On one hand, Sasuke's logic made sense. This was a B-rank mission and thus certain risks were expected of them to obtain their mission objective. But on the other, making a move without advising the rest of their team seemed too reckless to justify any information they might procure from this venture. I'm sure the rest are doing the same thing. Sasuke added. The pink-haired ninja looked at the falling rain and the empty streets. For some reason she highly doubted her friends were out scouring the city on such a precarious errand. More than likely they were out of the cold rain, snuggled up nice and warm in their rooms. You can go back to the room if you want to, the young Uchiha said, sensing Sakura's unease about his plan. But to make this reconnaissance worth anything, I'll need your help. Sakura was thoroughly ashamed she actually considered Sasuke's offer for a moment. She could say it was merely common sense that prevented her from committing to such a foolhardy plan, but deep inside, she knew it was only the fear. It was her fear of death that made her reluctant to step into harm's way, and her fear of the unknown that stopped her from doing her job. Cowardice told her to retreat back to the safety of her room. Her commitment to her friends and to their mission told her to take the risk. You actually need me? Sakura asked after a while. I'm not just getting in the way. Sasuke nodded. We're a team, right? Sakura smiled. Right. They walked in the pouring rain for a few more minutes, making a turn when Sasuke indicated, until finally they arrived at their destination. It was a large wooden building with a series of glowing lanterns dangling from the small covered walkway that extended from the entrance. The doors were shut and two burly men stood in front of it, their eyes watching the streets vigilantly from behind the dark sunglasses they wore. Inviting looking, Sakura muttered darkly. They stopped short of the building and Sasuke indicated Sakura towards a cluster of trees nearby. After ducking behind them, Sasuke said, if the information I got was reliable, this is the largest underground casino in Kakami. What? Sakura demanded, narrowing her eyes. A casino? What are we doing at a casino? We're a married couple out to have some fun. Sasuke replied. and maybe learn a few things about Gato at the same time. You think someone is just going to tell us information about a major crime syndicate boss if we play some cards with them? Sakura asked skeptically. If the stakes are right, the young Uchiha said confidently. This is an illegal gambling den. Find the right people and ask the right questions and we'll find Gato. Before Sakura could protest further, Sasuke tossed aside the umbrella and grabbed her wrist. Laughing like a maniac, he raced toward the door, pulling Sakura behind him as they charged through the rain. Following behind, she could see that he was smiling, as if all was right in the world. Sakura had never seen him smile before, and the realization made her join in Sasuke's laughter. Sopping wet and giggling like drunken fools, the two ninjas stumbled under the cover of the walkway and made their way for the door. Excuse me, sir, one of the door guards said. I'm afraid I can't let you in. Sasuke threw his head back and roared with laughter like the man had said something funny. What are you talking about? Check the list for a Mr. and Mrs. Chichiro. The guard glanced at the clipboard he had tucked under his arm. I'm sorry, but you're not on the list. What? Exploded Sasuke. He glanced at Sakura, his face bearing a mask of scandalized shock. Do you hear that, sweetheart? We're not on the list. This ridiculous charade made Sakura want to break into a fit of hysterical laughter. It was just too much. Sasuke was acting so completely out of character it made her want to break into tears of amusement. But for some reason, she decided that might be a tad overboard. They were rich kids looking to blow some money on cheap thrills, not a pair of escapees from a mental asylum. Terrible, dear, Sakura responded. A mischievous idea crept into her mind, and before rational thinking could make its argument, she threw herself onto Sasuke, wrapping herself around him and pulling him close. She rested her head against his chest, no longer needing to feign her happiness as she silently enjoyed the warmth of the young Uchiha's body. After all, if she was going to play the part, she might as well have some fun at the same time. Sasuke seemed completely unfazed and encircled her slim body with his arms. We're just here to have some fun, he explained. As he said this, one of his hands ventured dangerously low, trailing its way down Sakura's hips and coming to a rest on her rear. The pink-haired ninja forced herself to suppress a gasp of shock. Unsure of how she was supposed to react to such an audacious advance, she just smiled sweetly at the guard. You're going to have to go somewhere else, sir. The guard replied. Sasuke sighed and reached into his pocket, removed a wad bills from his wallet, and handed it to the guard. Check for our names again. The guard took the bills, examined them for a moment as if to inspect their validity, and then pocketed the cash. He looked at his clipboard again. Chichiro with a CH. He asked. They nodded and the guard motioned for his companion to open the door. Enjoy your stay, Mr. and Mrs. Chichiro, the guard said as the two ninjas stepped through the doorway. Thanks, Sasuke said. His hand was removed and Sakura was able to breathe freely again. We will. Hyuga Hinata was cold, wet and miserable. She knew she had made a mistake the moment she had fled from the hotel room, leaving a shocked Naruto in her wake, but her anger had blinded her to it. She realized her mistake again in the lobby as she prepared to leave the hotel, and this time it was her pride that compelled her to keep going. But when she acknowledged her mistake for the third time, framed in the doorway of the hotel with a world of pouring rain outside, it could only have been stupidity that encouraged her to venture forth into this terrible weather without an umbrella. Still fueled with fury by the denseness of the man she loved, she had walked down the street and made a random turn, uncaring of where she was going as long as it was away from him. This aimless wandering continued for about 5 more minutes, the amount of time it took for Hinata's rage to be subdued and her sensibilities to return. A strong gust of wind whipped through her blue hair, spraying her with ice-cold mist, awakening the young girl to her less than favorable situation. She had been walking pointlessly in the rain and was now soaked to her skin, freezing, and completely lost. Shivering, Hinata ducked underneath a public shrine and sat down next to the statue of the shrine's patron deity. Wrapping her arms around her body in a vain attempt to warm herself, the young Hyuga whimpered pitifully. I screwed up big time. Hinata muttered. She looked at the statue beside her, a small fat, bald man who was smiling toothily. What are you smiling about? She asked it. A groan of dismay escaped her lips as she sat there, contemplating what to do next. Naruto probably hated her, and rightfully so. How could she have said something so mean to him? Sure, he was as dense as a block sometimes, but that should have been expected. She should have been more forward, more aggressive, so that he knew her feelings without a doubt. But so much for that idea now. She wanted so badly to return to the hotel and beg for forgiveness. She wanted to assure him she had not meant any of what she said. She wanted to tell him she loved him. But how would Naruto respond? Would he be angry with her? No, he was too nice to get mad at anyone. But this was different. She had said she hated him. How could anyone forgive that? Tears formed in her pale eyes as potential scenario in Hinata's mind grew worse and worse. Maybe Naruto would hit her, or maybe he would angrily turn her away and demand another partner from Instructor Kakashi. He would probably be reassigned with Sakura, who would take advantage of the situation and. All I wanted was for him to like me, she sobbed, burying her head into her arms. Cold, scared, and with nothing but her worst fears to comfort her, Hinata sat there under the sanctuary of the old shrine, tears streaming down her cheeks. How long she sat there she could not remember, but at some point or another she must have fallen asleep, because when she opened her eyes again, it was pitch black outside. Terrific, she whimpered. Not only had her stupidity ruined any chance with Naruto, but it had probably made her miss the meeting with Instructor Kakashi as well. To top it off, it was still raining steadily even though the clouds had faded, leaving only translucent whips that thinly veiled the bright moon. The only way her bleak predicament could get any worse was if an asteroid happened to fall out of the sky and squish her flat, and even then that did not seem so terrible in comparison to her disastrous day. Death would be a welcome release from her misery. Hinata wiped away her dried tears and rubbed the sleep from her eyes. She tried to summon the courage she would need to confront her teammates, but understandably it did not come readily. At best she was facing suspension of her license to operate as a Konoha ninja for failing so glaringly on her first meaningful mission. At worst, Instructor Kakashi might be mad enough to recommend Hinata for a court-martial. Neither option was overly appealing to Hinata. She gathered the skirt of her dress, which had dried somewhat during her stay at the shrine, and prepared to set off into rain when something stirred loudly beside her. Alarmed, Hinata looked and saw that it was not something that had moved, but someone. In the darkness, it was hard to distinguish if the stranger was an enemy or just another refugee from the rain, but Hinata's ninja instincts reacted nonetheless. Her hand grabbed the kunai she had concealed in a thigh holster underneath her dress, and with pinpoint accuracy, pressed the razor-sharp tip against the stranger's throat. Move and I kill you, warned Hinata. Who the hell are you? The stranger chuckled humorously, an endearing sound that Hinata had heard all too many times in the past. In fact, she heard it daily in the classrooms of Konoha High, a melodious noise that punctuated every prank and antic that occurred in school. It was then that she realized this wasn't a stranger at all that was she threatening, but. The kunai slipped from her hands and clattered on the ground. Her hands flew to her mouth and she gasped in horror. Oh my god, Naruto. Still mad at me, huh? Asked Naruto. The spiky-haired troublemaker was leaning against the wall of the shrine, practically doubled under its spacious ceiling. He smiled warily at Hinata, ready to flee if his teammate made a move to kill him. Girls were so unpredictable that way. They greeted you with a smile to lull boys into a false sense of security, and then went straight for the jugular with all the feral animosity of a wild tiger. Or at least that was what Sakura had done to him once in 6th grade when he put bugs in her sandwich. And no, stammered Hinata hastily. What are you doing here? Naruto's eyes narrowed suspiciously. She did not look like she was going to hit him, but a ninja was always prepared for unsuspected duplicity. Surreptitiously, he edged to the front of the shrine as he answered. Well, when you ran away, I thought it might make sense to follow you and make sure you didn't get lost. Hinata glared at her partner. I didn't get lost. She protested, part of her resentment against Naruto still smoldering deep within. I was just. And then I tracked you here and you were asleep and I didn't want to wake you up. I guess I fell asleep while I was waiting, Naruto concluded sheepishly. Folding her arms crossly, Hinata said, I didn't need your help. Oh, the spiky-haired ninja replied. It was too dark to tell, but Hinata could have sworn he looked distinctly crestfallen at the moment. Well, yeah, sorry about that then. It's just, you know we're supposed to be a team and. He frowned and started to rise. I guess I'll just head to the briefing then. Hinata raised an eyebrow in surprise. The briefing? You mean it's not over? Naruto nodded. I set my watch to go off when it's time. He displayed the small watch around his wrist. Its glowing green numbers told Hinata they still had another 30 minutes before they were to meet with Instructor Kakashi. Well, I'll see you later then, Hinata. Yeah, murmured Hinata. Naruto slowly peeked under the roof of the shrine and then left the protective cover of the shrine. He stood there for a moment, oblivious of the rain that soaked his elaborate suit, and his eyes turned to stare at her. There was sadness to those azure eyes, a hurt that pierced through Hinata's soul and gnawed at her conscience. His pain made her feel good. It appeased her irritation knowing that her scathing rejection hurt him as much as his obtuse indifference had hurt her. He was finally feeling what she had endured for all these years, so why the guilt? Why that horrible, rotten feeling in the pit of her stomach that made her want to vomit? I'll see you later then. She finished lamely. Naruto nodded slowly, and then turned and began walking away. It was what he deserved, Hinata thought victoriously as she watched him leave. Was it? That nagging part of her conscience replied. Of course. He ignored me, belittled me, made me feel worthless. He did not recognize that you care for him. Who is to blame for that? I was about as subtle as a sucker punch to the throat. Maybe you should have punched him in the throat. Maybe that would have gotten his attention. If he didn't figure it out yet, it's clear he doesn't care. And that was why he trekked through the rain and then waited for hours by your side to make sure you were safe. And then Hinata finally understood. Oh crap. Without thinking, she ran out of the shrine and raced after Naruto. He was still walking slowly down the street, his head hung low, but he glanced around at the sound of footsteps behind him. Soaked strands of blonde hair dangling in front of his eyes, he looked shocked when he saw his teammate approaching. Hinata, he called. "En Naruto," Hinata whispered. She was crying again, harder this time as the dam containing her suppressed emotions finally opened. The tears that spilled from her pearly eyes caught the light of the moon, making them shimmer brightly in the darkness of night. Slowly, she walked towards him, and wordlessly wrapped her arms around his waist. I thought you said you hated me, Naruto said quietly. I could never hate you, she sobbed. Hinata gazed up into the face of her friend, and Naruto was struck just by how beautiful she looked. He had always thought she was pretty, but all the times he had stared at her in the hallways was nothing compared to how radiant she looked right now. Her hair was disheveled and her clothes were ruined, but that could not begin to detract from her lustrously gorgeous presence. I'm sorry, Naruto, Hinata said. I'm sorry for. Naruto gently placed his hand over her mouth, hushing the air of the Hyuga clan. We're friends. A true friend always forgives. Then you're not mad at me? Hinata asked hopefully. Naruto smiled. Are you mad at me? Not anymore, she answered softly. Then neither am I. Neither spoke for a while. They were soaked to the skin and it was freezing outside, but neither felt the necessity to leave the comforting presence of the other. Their togetherness shielded them from the cold, and both feared that the slightest disruption might shatter the bond that had formed between them. Gradually, their hands found each other and their fingers intertwined. "Let's get out of here," said Hinata. Naruto nodded in agreement, and hand in hand, they raced down the empty streets. Neither knew exactly where they were going, but for some reason, that did not seem to bother them. They would get there one way or the other, and when they did, they would arrive together. As they ran, Naruto yelled over the pouring rain, "I'm sorry too, you know." "I thought you said friends didn't need to ask for forgiveness," Hinata shouted back. "They don't," Naruto laughed, squeezing her hand playfully. Neither of them noticed the pair of eyes following them the entire time. After the two ninjas had left, a cloaked figure emerged from a nearby alleyway. The man was tall and lanky, and from inside the shadows of his voluminous hood, the metal plating of a forehead protector reflected the moon's luminous rays. There was nothing significant about the headband, nothing to separate it from any other ninja that might frequent the city of Kakami. There was nothing special about it except most of the ninjas that ended up in Kakami bore the emblem of the hidden village of the leaf. This one did not. Haruno Sakura was surprised by the atmosphere of the casino. Given its illegal nature, she suspected that it would be populated by a host of Kakami's criminal denizens, a motley assortment of the worst of the city's underworld. However, that was far from the case. Dispersed throughout the casino were normal-looking men and women who were merely testing their luck at one of the many games of chance that the gambling den offered. They were middle-aged for the most part, but their midst was punctuated periodically by the odd retired, trading merchant or a young couple like Sakura and Sasuke. All were lavishly attired, adorned in the glitz and glamour that their enormous wealth commanded. Even wearing the nicest dress that Sakura had ever worn in her life, she felt downright shabby compared to some of the other women. She took a sip of the complimentary tale that a waitress had placed in front of her some time ago. The ice had melted long ago, diluting the potency of the drink and ruining the taste, but that was the furthest thing on the young girl's mind at the moment. 21 to Mr. Chichiro. A man announced. Winner. Sitting next to her, Sasuke grinned and eagerly reached across the gaming table they were playing at, scooped up a large pile of chips and deposited them into the huge stack already in front of him. The man, the dealer judging from his casino uniform, smiled back and began shuffling the cards again. "This can't be your first time playing Black Cat, can it, Mr. Chichiro?" the dealer asked friend Lily. Sasuke smirked. "What can I say? I'm just lucky tonight." The dealer chuckled appreciatively and began passing out the cards. Sakura tried her best not to sigh. She was bored. Sasuke had been playing this stupid game for almost 2 hours now and they were no closer to obtaining their objective than when they started. In fact, the only new knowledge Sakura had acquired was the basics of the card game Sasuke was immersed in. It was called Black Cat, a game played with 52 cards ranging 1 through 10, where the objective for the players was to reach no more than 21 using 2 or more dealt cards. The catch was the Black Cat normal cards with drawings of black, felines with glowing bulbous eyes which had a value of 1 or 11 were also inserted in the deck. Combine a Black Cat card and a 10 as your first 2 cards and you'd reach Black Cat, an automatic win over the dealer who also sought to gain the highest hand at the table. Sasuke seemed pretty adept at playing. Occasionally he would bust, or take 1 card too many and go over 21, but for every loss he won twice as much the next time. A huge stack of chips were piled in front of him, a fact that did not go unnoticed by the casino's other customers. A large audience had steadily gathered around their table to observe Sasuke's uncanny prowess at Black Cat. "My 18 beats your 17, Sasuke announced after the cards were dealt. "I win." "Indeed you do, Mr. Chichiro," the dealer replied. He passed another column of chips in Sasuke's direction, who gladly added them to his enormous collection. Without even counting all the chips, Sakura estimated Sasuke had compiled almost 10 times as much as they had started out with. Idly, Sasuke span one of his chips on the table. "This is getting boring, honey," he said to his wife. "I need a challenge. Something exciting to keep this interesting." "You're taking all their money, darling," Sakura replied sweetly. Her fingers danced up Sasuke's shoulder and came to a rest on his lips. "You're just too damn good." "I am, aren't I?" the young Uchiha said. He rose from his seat and Sakura joined him. "This is getting boring. Perhaps we should seek our venue of entertainment elsewhere." "I wouldn't do that." A man stepped out the crowd, a small, fat man who was aging terribly. He was balding, and even the high collar of the expensive suit he wore could not disguise the rolls of fat on his neck. He extended a hand to Sasuke. "Allow me to introduce myself. I am Tonka, manager of this casino." "The manager, huh?" said Sasuke, shaking the hand. "A pleasure, I'm sure." Tonka walked around to the other side of the table, casually dismissing the dealer with a flick of his hand. "You seem to be enjoying yourself." "I'm winning, if that's what you mean." "Winning, but bored, I see." Tonka smiled. "I might be able to help you with that." "And what if my husband does not need your help?" Sakura wondered. She did not even know Tonka and she already disliked him. She knew his type. He was as oily as they came, with not an ounce of honesty or integrity to their name. She hoped Sasuke saw that in the casino manager as well. "Oh, he will, beautiful," Tonka promised. "For I'm going to offer a challenge that I sincerely doubt you will turn down. You see, when I play, I only play big." "How big?" Sasuke wondered interestedly. The fat manager thought for a moment. "What say all your chips?" "On one hand. A big risk," the young Uchiha replied. "The rewards should be comparable." "What do you suggest?" Tonka asked. "I need information. Certain information about a man named Gato I think you can provide me with," Sasuke said. "I'll wager all my chips in exchange for doubling my winnings and that information." The request was unexpected. Tonka seemed wordless for a moment. "What do you kids want with Mr. Gato?" he inquired. "That's irrelevant. Now, do we have a deal? That information is quite valuable. Too valuable, in fact. If you want the information, you'll have to ante up with more than just money." "What do you suggest, then?" Sasuke asked. This time there was no hesitation in Tonka's response. He looked at Sakura and beamed at her, dragging his tongue slowly across his lower lip and slurping loudly. "I want your gorgeous wife's body. One night with her." Fortunately for Sakura, she was too stunned by Tonka's perverted request to be offended enough to hurl her drink at him. Instead, she laughed scornfully and wrapped her arms around Sasuke's neck. "My husband would never allow something so ridiculous, you poor, depraved man." Sasuke reached up and pried Sakura's arms off of him. "I accept," he said. The reaction was as instantaneous as it was violent. Without thinking, letting her blind anger guide her, Sakura's hand lashed out, viciously striking Sasuke across the face. "How dare you!" shrieked Sakura. Sasuke pretended like he didn't hear her, casually wiping away the rivulet of blood that from his busted lip. "I said I accept." "He accepts but I do not," protested the pink-haired ninja heatedly. "This is insane. We need the information. This is the only way to get it," Sasuke explained. He winked at Sakura and then kissed her. With his lips clasped around hers, Sakura's anger ebbed away, surrendering to the tidal wave of ecstasy that eclipsed her entire being. When it was over, she could only nod weakly. Besides, he reassured his partner. "I never lose." He turned back to Tonka. "Deal the cards." Tonka dealt his cards first. A 10 and a 5 were placed on the table in front of the casino owner. Sakura's heart practically leapt with joy upon seeing the dismal hand that Tonka had drawn. At 15 points, if he hoped to contest with Sasuke's hand, would have to draw another card where getting a 10 and busting was incredibly high. The manager looked at his cards carefully, inspecting them as if trying to draw some inner meaning from the numbers staring up at him. Finally, he declared, "I'll stay at 15. You're staying at 15, Sasuke remarked, raising an eyebrow curiously. Dangerous. Perhaps not as dangerous as you might think, my young friend. Tonka snapped. He reached into the deck and tossed Sasuke his first card. A3, Sasuke muttered grimly. Whatever excitement Sakura had been harboring instantly dwindled into nothing. If he drew a 10 on the next draw, a very real possibility his hand would be even worse than Tonka's. Don't worry, Tonka snickered, eyeing Sakura lecherously. He licked his lips, his perverted gaze never leaving her. I'll take good care of you. Flushing furiously, Sakura crossed her arms defiantly across her chest. Like hell you will. The next card was dealt. It was an 8, making a total of 11 points in Sasuke's hand. Not so unlucky after all, Sasuke smirked. All he needed was a 10 and he'd hit 21, a definite win against the 15 points that Tonka was showing on the table. He tapped the green felt surface. Give me another card. You only get one more card, Tonka reminded Sasuke. That was another rule of the game Sakura had identified. When drawing on 11, the player was only allowed to take one additional card to increase the chance of the dealer winning. I know the rules. Give me a card. As you wish, the casino manager said. He tossed Sasuke his last card. Oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit. Smiling mockingly at Sakura was the visage of the black cat. 12 points or 22 points, gloated Tonka in delight. I win. Sasuke did not say anything at first, staring in mute horror at his losing hand. He had just lost. He had never lost before. Ever. With a cry of dismay he buried his face in his hands. Don't worry about a thing, Mr. Chichiro. Tonka said nastily. I'll be sure to enjoy your wife for the both of us tonight. Sakura recoiled in disgust at the casino manager's words. Then and there she vowed she would sooner die than submit to such a horrendous little man. She could feel the outline of the slim kunai strapped to her inner thigh, and had to resist the urge to draw it and prepare for the battle that was soon to come. Sasuke had pushed his luck too far, and now they would both have to fight their way out of it. I'm sorry, honey, Sasuke whispered. Forgive me. Don't talk to me, Sakura said furiously, her anger genuine and not the product of the elaborate facade they were entertaining. She had warned Sasuke that this was a bad idea, but the young Uchiha had insisted on doing something so reckless where this sort of fateful conclusion was inevitable. Never before had she been so much as annoyed by her idol. His utter perfection blinded her to whatever trivial faults he may have possessed. But now she could barely contain the urge to reach across the table and punch Sasuke for being so dumb. So tell me, Mr. Chichiro, how does your wife like it in bed? Tonka asked. Sasuke's hands lowered, revealing his face. He was no longer frowning, no trace of sorrow or remorse present. Instead, he was grinning. And that, Sakura decided, was definitely not good. In a blaze of lightning fast movement, Sasuke lunged over the desk and drew a dagger from the back of his pants. He landed on the ground next to Tonka's chair, and slammed the manager's face hard into the table. A loud crunch resounded in the casino as bones broke, and when Sasuke flung him back up, his face was a bloody mask of gore. But Sasuke was not done. He grabbed the man again and this time stabbed the knife he carried in the middle of Tonka's palm. Tonka's cries of pain pierced through the relatively quiet casino, drawing stares and the attention of the guards. 2 uniformed bouncers were rushing towards their table, weapons drawn, but Sakura was waiting for them. In moments, the 2 guards had felt the wrath of one of Konoha's best female ninjas, and were lying in a crumpled heap at the pink-haired ninja's feet. The rest of the guards were wise enough to stand back and watch. They were probably not paid enough to warrant handling anything more than the occasional drunk. Ninjas were way out of their league. You think I didn't notice you cheating, scoffed Sasuke. What are you talking about? Tonka protested. I didn't cheat. Bullshit, spat the raven-haired ninja. You cheated and now you're going to tell me everything you know about Gato. You're out of your mind. I'm not going to tell you any. Sasuke bashed the casino owner's face into the table again. When he raised it again, Tonka did not have much of a nose left. His face was an unrecognizable mess, covered in dripping scarlet and swelling bruises. Fine, yelled Tonka, his eyes screwed shut in agony. Fine. Then start talking, snarled Sasuke. Breathing deeply in ragged laborious gasps of air, Tonka began his confession. Gato operates in Kakami, he whimpered. Sasuke twisted the dagger embedded in the fat man's palm, ignoring Tonka's girlish cry of pain. Sakura winced and involuntarily rubbed her own hand, perhaps even feeling a little bit sympathetic for the lecherous manager's suffering. I already know that, the young Uchiha yelled. Tell me something I don't know. I can't. They'll kill me, Tonka wailed. Tell me or I'll kill you. Sasuke replied in a tone so menacing that even Sakura did not doubt the validity of this threat. Roughly, he withdrew the dagger from Tonka's palm and placed the edge of the bloody weapon against the manager's throat. Tell me. Sasuke, are you sure we should be doing this? Sakura whispered nervously, noticing the shocked stares of the patrons and the other casino guards. She did not like Tonka one bit, but she could not help feeling that there was something innately wrong about torturing people for information no matter how evil they might be. When Tsunade told them to gather intelligence about Gato's operation, surely this was not what she meant. Stay out of this. Sasuke snapped at Sakura. Leaning close to Tonka's face, he hissed, last chance before I cut your throat wide open. Tonka began weeping. Large tears formed in his eyes and rolled down his fat cheeks, and he began bawling. He was a pitiful sight. Forced over his own playing table and with a dagger pressed to his throat, the tears were the final straw for Sakura. Only moments ago, Tonka was set on raping her, but she could not bear the sight of Sasuke tormenting him in such a hideous fashion. Stop this! Sakura shouted. It isn't right. Sasuke did not even spare his teammate a glance. Paying no heed to Sakura's plaintive objections, he pressed the tip of the blade into Tonka's skin hard enough to draw a droplet of blood. Tell me what you know. Fine, screamed Tonka, the last of his determination to keep his ally a secret finally crumbling in the face of his cowardice. Fine, I'll tell you. The young Uchiha released some pressure on Tonka, allowing the manager to sit up but keeping the dagger close to the man's throat. Gato works with ninjas from the village of Mist, explained the casino manager. He's employed 2 enforcers. Their names are. Whatever else Tonka was going to say ended in a blood-curdling scream as his throat suddenly erupted in a geyser of crimson. His eyes rolled back, his lifeblood spraying a fine mist over the terrified spectators, and then his body pitched forward to come to a rest on the table. Protruding from the back of his neck was a thin, steel projectile that Sasuke had no trouble identifying as a throwing needle. Behind you, Sakura yelled. Standing behind them was a young woman. She was breathtakingly beautiful with long, silky black hair, and was clad in a tight green kimono that complemented her thin curvaceous figure. Her skin was as white as snow, a pale tone that accentuated the lushness of her lips and made her stunningly attractive features all the more appealing. In her small, delicate hands, a slim needle twirled expertly between her fingers, the same kind of needle that had just pierced through Tonka's throat. The crowd opened for her to pass through, and the mysterious young woman stopped at the gambler's dead corpse. She pulled the needle free of his neck, spraying blood everywhere as the gruesome wound reopened, and wiped it on the back of the dead man's suit before returning it to a holster strapped around her wrist. Who are you? Asked Sakura shakily, eyeing the assassin nervously. The girl smiled at her, a serene smile that looked perversely wrong on her pretty face. She had just murdered a man in cold blood, and the fact that she could still smile as if nothing was wrong chilled Sakura's blood. Who are you? It was Sasuke this time who nervously demanded this. He sounded frightened. Sakura did not know if this was merely a continuation of his charade or if he genuinely was unnerved by this unexpected turn of events. I am a representative of Mr. Gato, the girl told Sasuke. He has heard you've been asking about him and wishes to meet with you. He wants to meet with us? Asked Sasuke, surprised. The smiling assassin nodded. You've done a great favor to Mr. Gato by exposing Mr. Tonka as a cheat. We've suspected he's been stealing from us, and Mr. Gato feels that he owes you his gratitude. He doesn't owe us anything, Sakura replied quickly. We were happy to help out. Nonsense. The girl told the pink-haired ninja. I was instructed specifically to escort you to meet Mr. Gato, and I cannot return without my orders being followed. Sasuke eyed the strange girl carefully. She was a ninja. There was no doubt about that. No one else could have hurled a needle with the speed and precision necessary to kill a man. Was this the aforementioned ninja that the dead Tonka had spoken of? What's your name? The girl tossed her head back, flipping her mane of black hair casually out of her face. My name is Haku.